Hey guys, tonight we're time traveling. Sort of. But not to a grand battlefield or an emperor's court. Nope. You're waking up in a creaky wooden bed in 15th century Ottoman Istanbul, and you're already in trouble. Why? Because the sun's not up yet, the roosters aren't even pretending to be useful, and the morning prayer starts in 25 minutes. You were supposed to be up by now. Actually, you were supposed to be at the mosque by now. But there's a problem. You don't have a smartphone, a wristwatch, or even a rooster with a good work ethic. All you have is a vague sense of time based on the chill in the air and whether the bakery downstairs has started yelling about warm bread. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You roll out of bed, groggy. The wool blanket scratches a little. You're still wearing yesterday's trousers, because who has time for pajamas in this economy? And you shuffle to the window. The sky is in that sleepy gray zone before dawn. Somewhere, very faintly, you hear a muezzin's voice echo off the rooftops. But it's too far. You live in a quieter neighborhood near the Tannery District. Your local mosque doesn't even have a proper minaret, just a man with strong lungs and a tendency to oversleep. Which brings us back to you, still squinting at the sky, wondering, is it time? This is not a one-time crisis. It happens every morning. You're a junior apprentice in a workshop that repairs astrolabes, lanterns, and sometimes soup kettles when business is slow. The master doesn't tolerate tardiness. Once, he told you, if you're late again, I'll tie a brass bell to your beard. You think he was joking? Probably. So here's the problem. How are you supposed to wake up reliably without waking up every 10 minutes to check if it's almost time to wake up? You're not alone in this. Lots of people in your city are struggling with the same thing. In fact, this might be the biggest unspoken crisis in pre-modern urban life, getting up on time. And before you ask, yes, there are people whose job is to wake others up. They're called drummers or knockers, and they walk the streets before dawn, thumping on doors with sticks and shouting people's names. It's loud, crude, and highly imprecise. Also, they sometimes forget you exist. You briefly consider hiring one, but you make 3 axes a week, and they charge 5 just for Fridays. That's nearly a whole week of bread, cheese, and those sticky walnut pastries that taste like joy and regret. So numbers need a better plan, and that's when it starts. The tiny seed of an idea. What if you built something? Something mechanical, something loud, something that wakes you up before the master wakes you up. Of course, you don't know it yet, but this is the beginning of something almost revolutionary. Historians rarely talk about you. In fact, most of them don't even agree on whether early Ottoman alarm clocks really existed. Some say they were mythical, or at least ceremonial. Others argue that alarm might have just meant some guy yelling. The sources are vague, the footnotes even vaguer. But we're not here to write a textbook. We're here to live it. And right now, you're rubbing your eyes, putting on your worn leather shoes, and stumbling into the alleyway, determined to figure out how to wake yourself up before someone else does. The alley still smells like fish and bread, and that weird mixture of candle wax and donkey sweat you've never learned to identify. But it's home, You walk down the cobblestones, dodging a puddle that definitely wasn't there yesterday. The air is cool, the sky finally streaking with peach and pale blue. You make it to the workshop just as your master, Yusuf Effendi, unlocks the front door. He raises an eyebrow at you. "On time today," he mutters. "A miracle." You don't reply. You just nod, trying to act casual, like you didn't almost invent time travel this morning by sheer panic. The truth is, today you're not thinking about brass hinges or cracked sundials. Today, you're obsessed with a question. How do people actually wake up on time if they can't hear the muezzin? Because here's the problem. Not everyone in the empire lives within earshot of a well-staffed mosque. And even when they do, the call to prayer doesn't always carry well, especially during storms or market days or those mornings when the air is too thick with fog and gossip. Some families rely on older children to wake everyone up. Some rely on old habits. Some, weirdly, rely on a neighbor's chicken that just seems to scream at 4:45 every morning. No one knows why. The chicken might be a saint, but for most people, it's chaos. That's why a new profession has emerged in some corners of the city, the uyandırıcılar, or wakers. You've only heard whispers of them, men who patrol the streets before dawn. They tap on windows, whisper prayers, or throw pebbles at specific doors. In wealthier districts, some even use little flutes, delicate pipes, with a signature trill for each client. It's a service industry with no business card. Your friend Kamal swears by one particular waker, a man named Hassan, with perfect pitch and a deeply judgmental attitude. "He plays my wake-up tune," Kamal once told you, "and if I don't respond in 2 minutes, he throws bread at my window." But you live in a cheaper part of town. Bread-throwing Hassan does not make it to your block. You start asking around, quietly, in markets, in tea stalls, in line at the public bathhouse. You pretend it's for a story you're thinking about writing someday. Most people just shrug. One old man tells you he wakes up from pure spite. Another says his cat starts licking his eyebrows around dawn. Eventually, you gather a few facts. In some neighborhoods, early wake-up is still a family effort. An old woman with loud slippers, a boy trained to bang the pot 3 times, or a dog that knows exactly when to bark. In others, local imams coordinate volunteers to make informal wake-up rounds. And in the wealthiest areas, a few merchants have started importing European spring-wound devices that sort of resemble clocks, but mostly resemble frustration. You even hear rumors, probably exaggerated, that in India someone built a water candle clock that dripped water onto a metal plate, making a sound that startled you awake, or just made you need to pee. Historians today argue whether any of these systems actually worked. Some say they were symbolic, meant to show devotion rather than keep actual time. Others believe they were good enough, especially when no one had to be exactly anywhere at 8:01 a.m. sharp. Still, for the common Ottoman citizen, there was no one-size-fits-all solution, which meant that if you were poor, forgetful, or just didn't like being screamed at by a guy with a stick, you were out of luck. You walk home that evening with a new kind of determination. If these wakers can't reach everyone, maybe something else can. A bell, perhaps. A loud one. Triggered not by a person, but by time itself. You don't know how yet. But as you walk through the spice-scented streets of Istanbul, dodging donkey carts and gossiping fishmongers, a tiny idea starts to buzz in the back of your head. It's not a plan, not yet. Just the faint ticking of a question. Can time make a sound, even when no one's there to tell it to? Your room that night feels different. Not because anything has changed, Your straw mattress still crunches like old paper, and the neighbor's cat is still howling romantically at the moon. But because your brain won't stop whirring, you lie on your back, staring at the ceiling beams, replaying everything you've seen in Yusuf Effendi's workshop. Cogs, weights, tiny bells, timekeeping tools for the rich, mostly, but still, tools, real ones. And it hits you. Maybe the answer isn't outside your window. Maybe it's already in the parts drawer. You get up, barefoot, and shuffle through your tiny chest. There's a broken sundial you took apart last month, a bent astrolabe arm, a bit of copper wire you've been hoarding for no good reason. Until now, you're not an inventor, not officially. You fix things. But tonight, you're going to unfix things. On purpose. There's no blueprint, of course. You don't even know what to call what you're trying to build. A time bell? A self-slapper? Okay, not that one. Maybe a clock that fights back. It starts simple. A dangling weight, a pulley, and a spoon. The idea is that the weight will fall slowly, really slowly, overnight. And when it hits the bottom, it'll yank the pulley, which will flip the spoon, which will, hopefully, smack the hanging pot lid and make a loud, angry clang. Very scientific. You spend the whole night adjusting the angle of the weight, adding tiny pebbles to slow it down. It's not elegant, and the spoon is bent because you accidentally sat on it last week. But by the time the call to prayer echoes faintly in the distance, it's kind of working. You fall asleep with your cheek against the table, snoring softly, while your device ticks silently beside you. And then it happens. Clang. You jolt awake, not because of the sound itself, but because the pot lid fell off the table and hit your foot. It's not perfect. But you did it. You built something that waited until roughly the right time and then made noise. Sure, it also woke up the neighbor's baby and maybe scared a pigeon off your windowsill, but still, success. The next morning, your master notices your suspiciously alert expression. "You sleep last night?" he asks. You nod, deeply, which is not technically a lie. He doesn't push, but he does ask you to polish a European mechanical clock he's recently been asked to clean. It's huge, wooden, with brass hands and a winding key that looks like it could start a small ship. You study it like it's a sacred text. It's beautiful, but overcomplicated. It's also not loud enough to wake anyone unless they sleep next to it. And it needs rewinding every 10 hours. Still, you're fascinated. Inside, you see gears, springs, a lever mechanism, and tucked in one corner, a bell striker. A real one. This is promising. Historians today are torn on when and where alarm clocks truly began. Some credit the ancient Greeks with the first water clocks that used mechanical arms to ring bells. Others point to 9th century Chinese incense clocks that burned through strings to trigger a noise. But none of those made it to Istanbul in working condition, and certainly not into the homes of candle makers and astrolabe apprentices. The Ottoman world was practical, deeply spiritual, yes, but also full of tinkerers. People who understood that time wasn't just philosophical, it was personal, especially when bread dough had to rise at dawn and prayer required punctuality. So while the world argues about the first alarm clock, you're not trying to be the first. You're just trying not to get yelled at before breakfast. That night, you upgrade your invention. Add a tin whistle. Attach a better pulley. Replace the spoon with a small wooden arm that strikes a suspended teacup. The sound it makes is surprisingly cheerful, like a very annoyed bird. You laugh. For once, you're excited to go to sleep. You've just become a one-person research lab for the thing no one knows they need until they oversleep and nearly get fired. You don't tell anyone at first. It's not that you're afraid someone will steal the idea. Frankly, most of the guys at the bathhouse can't even fix a jammed cupboard, let alone engineer a self-ringing morning nightmare device. But still, you want to test it. Privately. Quietly. Like any good inventor who suspects their creation might accidentally set the mattress on fire. You spend a few nights refining the mechanism. You swap out the tin whistle for a hammered copper disc. Turns out, whistles and sleep do not mix. You add a slow-drip water weight to regulate timing, inspired by that possibly mythical Indian candle clock you once heard about. The results? Slightly less terrifying. Slightly more accurate. Still enough to make you kick the wall. The real breakthrough, though, comes by accident. You're at the bazaar picking up lamp oil when you overhear a woman arguing with a vendor. "It's too much," she insists. "He doesn't even come every day anymore. Yesterday, I had to wake up my husband myself." You perk up. She's talking about a waker. "I swear," she continues, "if I have to throw lentils at his face one more time, I'll start doing it for the whole street." That gives you an idea. Not the lentils. The whole street. What if this wasn't just for you? What if your strange little clock could be something people actually wanted? When you get back to the workshop, you bring it up with Yusuf Effendi, casually over tea, as though you didn't stay up till 2 a.m. adjusting a pulley that was squeaking like a guilty mouse. He raises an eyebrow. You're saying, a device that rings? At a set time? By itself? You nod. He takes a sip of tea, then mutters, "Sounds dangerous." But he doesn't stop you. You take that as permission. You spend the next week building a second version. This time, with purpose. Smoother gear teeth. A sturdier bell. A casing that doesn't look like you built it while being chased by a goat. You even stain the wood a warm cherry brown and carve a crescent moon into the side. Purely decorative, but satisfying. One night, you set it up outside the workshop just behind the market wall. You hide nearby and wait. And at exactly dawn, ding, 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 a vendor setting up his fig stand jumps. 2 kids peek over the wall. Someone yells, "Who's hitting a goat?" But no one seems to actually see the source. You feel like a wizard. A tired, underpaid wizard with a questionable mustache. Back then, of course, no one called these devices alarm clocks. In Ottoman Turkish, the term was closer to zaman çeyini, or time bell. And there's still debate over what your creation technically is. Is it a timekeeper, a novelty, a minor disruption? Historians can't agree. Some think these early Ottoman inventions were just mechanical toys for rich families. Others think they were part of a broader, decentralized response to urban sprawl, ways to maintain spiritual discipline and social routines in the absence of mosque proximity. But you? You just wanted to avoid being yelled at for being late. It's a small goal, but the world often changes because someone doesn't want to be yelled at. Soon, your friends start asking questions. "Hey, did I hear something weird this morning? What's that ticking noise coming from your bag? Why do you smell like grease and jasmine?" You tell them. Eventually, just a few. The curious ones. And you see their eyes light up, not because they care about gears, but because they all have the same thought. Wait, I could use one of those. And now, things are about to get interesting. You don't start a business exactly. Not yet. But the requests begin. First, it's your friend Mehmed, the bookbinder, who's always late to Friday prayers because my dreams are very detailed, brother. You install a clunky version of your alarm machine near his bedroom window. The next day, he arrives at the mosque half an hour early and glares at you like you've betrayed him personally. Then, it's Naylan, the widow who sells sweets by the hammam. She wants something gentle but stern, which sounds less like a clock and more like an ex-boyfriend. Still, you do your best. Her device makes a low, polite chime, like a small gong that knows not to disturb the cat. She loves it. Before long, you're crafting 2 or 3 of these strange objects a week. Each one is slightly different. A bell here, a thump there, a whistle you quickly abandon after it gives Yusuf a migraine. You're learning that timing is everything. Ottoman cities didn't rely on a single central time source. Sure, mosques had muezzins and public clocks, and there were water clocks in madrasas and palaces, but the average person? They depended on rhythms, prayers, markets, the scent of bread baking at dawn, and of course the human alarm clocks, men, and sometimes women, who went door to door at unspeakable hours to knock or call through windows. But now, suddenly, people are asking you to build something that lets them sleep without anxiety, something that wakes them up without depending on unreliable nephews or overworked mosque boys. You're not changing the world, just easing it click by click. Your devices don't have names. Not yet. Some call them Chalar Sat, ringing hour. Others just say, that clunky box that makes noise when you least want it to. One even ends up in the hands of a spice merchant from Damascus. He takes it home, shows it off to his cousins, and comes back 2 weeks later asking if you'll make another. But this one needs to be louder. My uncle sleeps like a camel. You oblige? Of course, these are still handmade, one by one, contraptions. You're bending copper, carving wood, aligning gears by candlelight. And half the time, you have to manually tweak the drip weights because the humidity makes everything go wobbly. But there's something peaceful in that. You sit on the workshop floor at night, listening to the rhythmic click of your latest creation, counting down to its next performance. It's not precise, not like those European clock towers with their smug Roman numerals. But it's yours. There's a kind of poetry to it, this quiet, silly rebellion against chaos. One night, while oiling a spring mechanism, you imagine the future, a world where every household has one of these, where people don't need to rely on roosters or their neighbor's cough. You laugh. Impossible, you whisper to the gears. They'd never give up the snooze button, and yet something in your bones tells you you're not the only one building like this. Somewhere, someone else is tinkering. Maybe in Cairo, maybe in Venice, maybe in a tiny village where a baker is tired of burning bread. Historians now debate whether the Ottoman world invented alarm clocks or just reinvented them in a more accessible, localized way. Most agree these weren't clocks as we understand them. They were solutions, workarounds, acts of gentle defiance against time's slippery fingers. And you? You're still just trying to make it to morning prayers on time. You wake up one morning to find a chicken pecking at your newest invention. This would be less alarming if the chicken weren't wearing a tiny bell around its neck, and if the invention in question weren't still ticking. You stare at the scene, barefoot, half awake, hair resembling an unwatered broom. The chicken seems unfazed. You chase it off with your sandal and inspect the device. A little bent, but still operational. You make a mental note. Never store clock mechanisms near the grain sacks again. Life in the Ottoman world isn't always graceful. By now, word has gotten around that you make things that chime. You're not famous exactly, but famous enough that the local imam wants to speak to you. You panic for half a day thinking he's going to ban your inventions. After all, who dares compete with the ancient tradition of the azan, the call to prayer? You walk to the mosque with the tension of a man headed to a public scolding. But instead the imam chuckles and says, "Could you make one that whispers, 'Wake up,' or 'Miss breakfast?'" You nearly cry from relief and say yes. That's how your invention winds up inside the mosque's side room, your most polished model yet. A beautiful walnut casing, an intricately coiled spring made from repurposed watch parts, and a mechanism that gently chimes twice, then stops. Not disruptive, just persuasive. More people notice. Now the scholars from the nearby madrasa come knocking. One asks if you could build a version that runs on water power, so it can be used for ritual timing. Another wants a version that ticks to the rhythm of a specific surah from the Quran. You try not to laugh, not because it's silly, because it's brilliantly specific. So you try, you test, you fail, you spill water on your lap, curse under your breath, quietly, and burn your thumb trying to weld a new copper base plate. But eventually, one works. The scholar grins. It's not divine timing, but it's something. Meanwhile, you start keeping notes, diagrams, measurements, theories. You even scribble an idea for an alarm that's triggered by incense burning down to a string, a trick you heard was used in ancient China. You don't know it yet, but you're becoming what the 21st century will one day call a maker. You're building a vocabulary of time. The thing is, most people think of the Ottomans as lovers of tradition, mosques, turbans, miniatures, spices, tea, but beneath the surface was a quiet undercurrent of innovation, especially in places people overlook: kitchens, bathhouses, madrasas, places where time mattered but couldn't always be measured. Historians now argue whether Ottoman engineers had access to earlier Byzantine escapement mechanisms, or whether everything was reverse engineered from Chinese water clocks. No one can say for sure. The records are vague. The truth is probably a messy blend, like most of history. But in your little corner of the city, you're making progress in a different language, the language of listening. You notice how people react. You ask them, was it too loud? Too early? Did it scare the cat? And they tell you. Some say it was perfect. Some say it reminded them of a thunderstorm. One says it made them dream of drums. And so you adjust, a little less clang, a little more chime. You swap the bronze bell for a hollow reed. It's not just engineering anymore. It's curation. You're not just waking people up. You're helping them sleep in peace, knowing that morning won't forget them. You don't realize it, but you've started a pattern, not a business. Not yet. Just a quiet rhythm. Tinker, test, deliver. Drink tea. Fail dramatically. Start over. And then one day, a man knocks on your workshop door with an unusual request. I need something that wakes me up before sunrise, but only on Tuesdays. You blink at him. He continues, dead serious. I bake for the Sultan's kitchens. On Tuesday mornings, the baklava batch starts at the third rooster. But if I wake too early, I argue with my wife. If I wake too late, the sugar crusts. You think about this far more than you should. This becomes your new obsession. Selective timing. A way to program your invention so it doesn't ring every day. In truth, you don't quite solve it, but you get close. You design a rotating pinwheel with marked tabs for specific days, which lift a latch only when aligned. It's clunky, wildly inaccurate, and deeply satisfying. And somehow, it works just enough. The baker returns the following week with a tray of still-warm pistachio rolls and a look of reverence in his eyes. Brother, he says, you saved my marriage and the pastries. Word spreads. And now, you're not just the guy who makes noisy boxes. You're the sleepsmith of Üsküdar, a nickname you didn't choose, but one your friends now whisper with exaggerated reverence every time you sneeze. Orders start coming from wealthier clients. A minor pasha wants one shaped like a falcon. An Armenian merchant requests a double-ringed bell tuned to match his singing parrot. A widow in Galata wants an alarm that flashes light instead of making noise, because her ears aren't what they used to be. And suddenly, you're not just making clocks, you're crafting experiences. There's a kind of poetry to this moment in Ottoman history. On the surface, it's the age of domes and courtyards, of caravans and silk. But under that polished tile is a bustling, messy, improvising world. Time isn't a straight line here. It's a circle, a spiral, a conversation between sun, sleep, bells, and bread. Modern scholars still can't agree on how standardized Ottoman time really was. Some argue that each mosque's muezzin followed his own set of hour marks. Others claim there were guild efforts to synchronize prayers across cities using complex astrolabes and shadow boards. And then there are your clocks, personal, imperfect, deeply human. You realize something unexpected. The more you build these machines, the more you notice how people feel about time, not just how they measure it, but how they wrestle with it, fear it, ignore it, try to tame it. Time isn't just the enemy of sleep. It's the boundary between hope and routine. And your little devices, awkward as they are, give people a small illusion that they are in control. You're proud of that. One night, as you finish a delicate brass adjustment on a custom-ordered piece, you look out the window. The city is glowing. Candles flicker in shadowed windows. Somewhere, a child is crying. Somewhere else, a street performer plays the ney. You hear distant laughter. A mule complains. A breeze rattles your shutters. You glance at your own clock. Tick, tick, tick. It's a soft rhythm. The rhythm of someone trying to hold time in their hands, even just for a second, before it slips away again. You start hearing rumors that your little clocks might be catching the eye of some bigger players. Not just bakers or spice merchants anymore, but palace officials. The kind of people who want everything just so and have the gold to pay for it. One afternoon, a sharply dressed courier arrives with a sealed letter bearing the Sultan's seal. Your heart skips a beat. This is not a request for a simple alarm. The letter asks you to visit the Topkapi Palace. You imagine yourself walking through vast halls surrounded by silks, eunuchs, and secret plots. You even rehearse a humble bow in your head. When you arrive, the Grand Vizier greets you. He explains that the Sultan wants a special device, an alarm that can wake him up without disturbing the entire palace. The Sultan is an early riser, but also a notorious light sleeper. One false clang, and the whole court is wide awake, grumbling over their coffee. You nod, understanding the delicacy of the task. You spend days sketching, prototyping, and testing. Eventually, you build a device with a featherlight hammer that gently taps a small gong hidden behind velvet curtains. It's almost invisible and whisper quiet. You install it inside the Sultan's chambers. The next morning, the Sultan wakes up exactly on time, without a single courtier being roused prematurely. Word spreads. You are summoned for tea with palace artisans and are introduced to master clockmakers who work on grand public clocks in Istanbul. They share stories about how European clocks have gears so precise they would shame your handmade pieces. But your invention has a charm that no imported timekeeper can match. Here's a secret. Many of the palace makers quietly admire your creativity, but shake their heads at your rustic craftsmanship. But the Sultan? He's delighted. And you realize that your invention, born in a small workshop, has bridged two worlds, the sophisticated and the practical. At night you lie awake, imagining what comes next. Will your designs inspire others? Will the Ottomans pioneer a new era of personal timekeeping? Or will these little machines remain charming curiosities, overshadowed by grander towers and ticking monuments? Historians still debate the extent of Ottoman clockmaking innovation. Some say these personal alarms were rare novelties. Others believe they were more widespread but simply undocumented. One thing is clear: your work represents a quiet revolution, an attempt to humanize time, to bring it closer to everyday life. You smile softly and adjust the spring on your newest creation. Tick, tick, tick. You begin to realize that your invention isn't just a tool, it's a conversation starter. One day, a visiting traveler from Europe hears about your alarm clocks. He's fascinated and asks if he can study them, even buy one for his homeland. You agree, cautiously. He watches as you carefully dismantle the mechanism, explaining each cog and spring in your halting Turkish, peppered with some Greek words. He nods thoughtfully and says, "In my country, these are called clocks, but most people rely on church bells and servants." You smile. For all the sophistication of Europe's grand clock towers, the average person's morning is still ruled by the unpredictable bark of a servant or the crow of a rooster. Your small alarms represent something different: personal agency, a way to claim time for oneself rather than submitting entirely to communal schedules. You also discover a surprising link. The traveler tells you about early alarm devices used in Germany, wooden boxes with small hammers that strike bells when a weight falls. The designs differ, but the goal is the same: to tame morning's chaos. Historians today are still unsure how much Ottoman inventors like you influenced European clockmakers, or vice versa. The Silk Road was more than a trade route for spices. It was a highway for ideas, some more secretive than others. You find this connection thrilling, that a simple device can weave threads between distant cultures. Sometimes you think about how time is a universal problem, how every society struggles to wake up without annoying their neighbors. Your clocks might be humble, but they are part of a global story, a story of people trying to greet the day gently. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most human invention of all. You notice how your invention starts to influence daily life in unexpected ways. Some customers request alarms that don't just ring. They puff out a small cloud of fragrant rose water, a scent beloved in Istanbul. Others want their clocks to play soft tunes from the ney, the reed flute, to wake them gently. One eccentric poet asks for a clock that recites a short verse at dawn to inspire his mornings. You're amused, but take on the challenge. After all, if people want their mornings to be a performance, who are you to say no? This creative spirit spreads. Small workshops pop up, experimenting with different alarm mechanisms. Some add mechanical birds that chirp. Others create elaborate automata that wave tiny flags when it's time to wake. Your invention becomes a seed. The Ottoman Empire, with its diverse cultures and rich artisan traditions, embraces this small revolution in waking. Yet historians argue over how widespread these personal alarms actually were. Some say they were limited to wealthy elites. Others believe common folk had their own simpler versions. The truth is lost in the shadows of time. But what remains is clear. These devices reflect more than just the desire to wake up. They embody a longing for control, for beauty in routine, for gentle nudges into the day. And that, you think, is something anyone, rich or poor, can appreciate. You polish your newest clock, smile, and imagine the millions of silent mornings it might brighten. Tick, tick. Your workshop buzzes quietly as you tinker with new ideas, and word spreads to unexpected places. One evening, A scholar from the palace library visits, curious about your clocks. He tells you about ancient timekeeping devices he's studied. Water clocks from Mesopotamia, sundials from Egypt, and candle clocks from China. You realize your alarms are part of a long human obsession with measuring and mastering time. But your scholar friend has a theory that sparks your interest. What if your invention isn't just about waking up, but also about marking moments, like tiny reminders that life moves forward, whether we like it or not? You start experimenting with clocks that can be set not only for mornings, but also for other events, meal times, prayer calls, or even meetings with friends. This new functionality intrigues the merchant community. A spice trader commissions a clock to signal when ships are due to arrive, helping him prepare for negotiations. A caravan leader orders one that chimes to mark shifts for his camel drivers during long desert journeys. Your alarms become portable, little anchors for time in a world that feels vast and unpredictable. Scholars today still debate whether these multifunctional alarms were common or rare luxuries. But you know this, every time your clock rings, it's not just sound, it's connection to family, work, faith, and community. And in that small sound lies a world of human stories. You start noticing something interesting about the materials you use. Brass, wood, leather, silk. Each one brings a unique challenge and character to your alarms. One day, an old leather worker stops by your shop, fascinated by how you use his craft in clock straps and cases. He tells you about the centuries-old leather tanning techniques passed down in his family, techniques so secret that even the Sultan's court doesn't fully understand them. Inspired, you begin collaborating with artisans across Istanbul, metal workers, carpenters, leather crafters, each adding their own expertise. This collaboration turns your invention into a truly Ottoman artifact, blending technologies and aesthetics from many cultures. You marvel at how something as simple as an alarm clock can become a tapestry of skills and traditions. But not everyone is convinced. Some purists argue that a clock should be all metal or all wood, and that mixing materials dilutes the craftsmanship. Others worry that your colorful, decorated alarms stray too far from traditional designs. Historians still debate the importance of these hybrid crafts in Ottoman timekeeping. Yet you smile, knowing that this blend of materials is exactly what makes your creations alive. Like Istanbul itself, a city where East meets West, old meets new, and every day is a fresh start. Tick, tick, tick. You find yourself wondering about the people who actually used your clocks every day. One morning, a young woman visits your workshop, shy but curious. She tells you that waking up on time is crucial for her job as a nurse at the local hospital. She's tired of relying on loud, clunky devices that scare her patients awake. She asks if you can make a quieter, gentler alarm. Inspired, you work on a new design, a clock that uses a soft, rhythmic tapping, almost like a heartbeat, to wake the sleeper gradually. You imagine her waking up to this calm pulse, ready to care for others. In Ottoman society, women's roles in technology and trade were often overlooked or unrecorded. Historians debate how much access women had to inventions like yours, or whether they influenced designs quietly behind the scenes. Your encounter makes you think, maybe these gentle alarms were a small way to ease daily stresses, especially for those caring for others. You polish the final product, feeling a quiet pride. Your clocks aren't just machines. They're companions in the early hours, partners in the start of countless days. Tick, tick, soft and steady. As your reputation grows, you're invited to a gathering of inventors and craftsmen in a hidden corner of Istanbul. It's a lively scene, everyone sharing ideas, tools, and dreams under dim oil lamps. You bring your latest alarm clock prototype. One older clockmaker, known for his grand public tower clocks, looks at your tiny device and chuckles. "You must be the Sultan's little secret," he jokes, making noise without noise. You laugh, but inside you feel proud. Here, among peers, your invention is appreciated for its subtlety and cleverness. You discuss the future. Some envision clocks that use water or steam. Others talk about complicated gears from Europe. You realize the Ottoman Empire stands at a crossroads between tradition and innovation. Your small alarms, simple yet elegant, represent this blend. Historians still argue how much influence these small inventors had on global clockmaking. But you know the truth. Sometimes the smallest ideas echo the loudest in history, and your gentle alarm, quietly ticking away, is one of those whispers. Tick, tick, tick. The years pass, and you watch as your humble alarms slowly fade from the records. Larger factories and mechanized production begin to dominate the scene. Your handcrafted clocks, once a novelty, become collectors' curiosities. But even as the world changes, you know your invention made mornings a little gentler for those who used it. You imagine a sleepy merchant in a distant city, a poet waking softly to a whispered verse, or a nurse comforted by a quiet tap. Your work, though small, became part of the daily rhythm of life. Historians still debate the true impact of these early Ottoman alarms. Were they pioneers of personal timekeeping or charming oddities? Whatever the answer, you smile, knowing you brought a little magic to the morning. Now, as you lay down your tools for the last time, you feel a quiet satisfaction. Tick by tick, your invention has woven itself into the fabric of history. And with that gentle ticking, you fade into the peaceful rhythm of the night. Now, slow your breathing. Feel your body sinking deeper into your bed. The sounds of the day are fading away, replaced by the soft, rhythmic ticking of a distant clock, just like the ones we've talked about tonight. Imagine that gentle tap, that subtle hum, lulling you farther and farther into calmness. Your mind drifts through quiet streets of old Istanbul, past softly glowing lamps and quiet workshops, where time moves just slow enough for dreams to take hold. You're already beginning to slip into that peaceful place where stories blend with sleep. No need to hold on to the day's worries. Let them float away like morning mist. You're safe here, wrapped in the comforting hum of history's gentle heartbeat. So, rest well now. Let the night carry you away, and when you wake, maybe you'll feel a little lighter, a little more ready to greet the day, just like those first soft alarms nudging the world awake with kindness. Good night, and sweet dreams.